Hello, everyone, and we are back with another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast, and we got another amazing guest for you guys. And man, she has an amazing story, and she has an amazing podcast too. But we're not going to talk about it right now. We're going to let her talk and tell you about it. But she has an amazing journey, so I want you guys to enjoy this conversation. Now, before we get started, do me a favor: if this is your first time, head over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification, so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. And I have to tell you this before we get started. This is for educational purposes only. And as I said before, we have another amazing guest. We have Maya here, and she is the host of the Sibling Loss podcast or Surviving Siblings podcast. I do apologize for that, Maya. Don't she's going to kill me. Y'all should have seen the look that she just gave me right now. No, she is blessing us with a story today. And so she's here. And Maya, thank you for being here. Thank you for just coming in to share your journey and everything, your experience with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it can be kind of a mouthful, right? The Surviving Siblings podcast. I kind of thought about that when I was creating the show. And the name was so important to me, though, because there's just not a lot of terminology for what I've been through, right? And what we've been through.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll just dive in. So, my name is Maya, and I founded the Surviving Siblings podcast in March. It'll be 2 years. It's only been 2 years. But I lost my brother to a homicide in November of 2016. And that was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. It's the worst thing that will happen to a lot of people in their lives. I didn't know there was this huge community out there that had lost siblings like I did, or even in different ways.
Mhm.
So it was quite a journey, and I'm happy to get into that and talk about that. But, going through a homicide, there's not just the loss, there's the investigation that goes on. There's so many different moving pieces to the puzzle, which there is in all different types of loss and grief. And it took me 5 years. And then I decided I really wanted to, I was already podcasting. I already had another podcast, but so I felt really comfortable in this format of like telling my story and being open and sharing. And so I said, I really want to tell my brother Andreas' story. I really want people to know what actually happened. And I want to share my part of the story too, because if there's anyone else out there, at least one person that has gone through this, it was horrific. And so apparently there's a lot of people out there because we're going into season 5 and we share other people's stories. I had no idea that my story would resonate so deeply with a lot of people, which breaks my heart. But at the same point, I'm happy that I was able to start to build this community and connect with people like you, Tony.
Yeah. I'm glad that you reached out. I think I was following you for a while on Instagram and just checking out everything. And so you got to imagine my excitement when you was like, hey, I would like to be on your show, right? So, because a lot of people don't really think about the loss of siblings,
Yep.
and we've talked about this before, and my heart is with you because a homicide is something totally different. Coming from someone who's been on the streets before,
Yep.
gang banging and things like that, I could tell you that, watching and seeing the things I've seen and having to bury the amount of people that I've buried from homicides, from reckless brutalities and things like that, on the inside looking out, we never think about the families that are being affected.
Right.
The numbers of brothers and sisters, mothers, uncles, cousins, and things like that are being affected. We look at things from a more personal point of view, a little bit more selfish point of view, because it's like, oh man, you just took my homie. I got to go do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you give a different perspective on this
Yeah.
because you are the surviving sibling.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And I think, some of all the stories are very difficult. They're all very challenging. It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't matter how you lose your sibling, but with my particular story and it being homicide, and there's quite a few people that do come on the show and share about homicide as well, but it's all siblings. So there's all different types of losses. But when dealing with homicide, to your point, I do think I get asked the question a lot, like, how have you been able to forgive the people that did this to your brother?
Mm-hmm.
How have you been able to it's not the kind of forgiveness where it's like, okay, you're in a fight with a family member or you're in a fight with a friend, you talk it through, you work it through, and you move forward that way. It's not that kind of forgiveness, right? Because to your point, you the people that do this, there's various reasons why. None of them are excusable or acceptable or fill in the blank, right? But the people that do this are not the same kind of person that you would typically have in your life. And if you do, you're not going to have them in your life anymore. So you're going through maybe some secondary losses there as well, which I'm happy to talk about as well. But, with this, you have to forgive in a sense for yourself. You're not necessarily saying what that person did is okay. And you're not necessarily saying, I forgive you. That's my opinion about it. Like, that's how I dealt with it. That's how I've moved past it. Doesn't mean I'm not angry at that person. It doesn't mean that I don't wish bad things on that person sometimes. Let's be real. I'm
Understood.
human, right? But I'm in a place where I'm no longer angry. I don't hold on to it every day. I'm not the person that has to live with it. And you brought up something really interesting too, being someone who has come from a really rough background and then now turned your life a total 180, that you saw these things happening on the streets. And sometimes, when these people are doing these things, it's justified in their mind because they're not mentally well, they're not mentally stable, they're doing drugs, alcohol, different things like that, to alter their state of mind. Again, these are no reasons or excuses that we should say it's okay, but you're not thinking about the families behind it. And that's something that they have to think about later on, and they're going to have to live with the rest of their life. And I think that that's not punishment alone, but I do think that I wouldn't want that challenge. I wouldn't want to deal with that. So it's a part of the process, starting to think about those aspects.
See, I love that you said that it is part of the process because every loss that we go through, there's a process that we have to go through. And I just got done talking with another great colleague, amazing person, about that very thing, right? The process of growing through that loss, right? You know what I'm saying? And there was a comment, Lakaya, thank you again for this. She's on every last one of them. I love that, man. She's a great supporter. Lakaya, go check out her podcast, the Surviving Siblings podcast. Go check it out, please. And let her know, Tony. Let her know that Tony sent you, all right? You know what I'm saying? So she knows. But no, we got it to that conversation. And I told her, I said, I get it, to a certain extent because of every version, like the version of you before your brother passed,
Mm-hmm.
when he passed, and after he passed, right? There's a process that we have to go through because and it reigns true. You're not the same person.
No.
When it happened, before then, everything seemed great. When it happened, there's the initial surrealness that comes behind it, the wanting to point the fingers and
Mm-hmm.
things like that, and then the individual that you became afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you had to grow into who Maya is now. There's a process, and in between all of those things, you know what I'm saying? You take in all of these situations, scenarios, the investigations, and things like that. So now, it I want to pose the question: how did you find forgiveness for the individual that did this, that turned your life around?
Yeah, I don't think that, again, this is a big question. And I get asked this question almost every single week, whether I'm on TikTok live or, in group or whatever. Um, it's not, people are like, there's no way I'm never going to forgive the person that did this. I don't want people to get it confused. It's not the same type of forgiveness, right? It's not the same thing as like, oh, I've healed from this person doing something, right? Like, I don't know, my brother took my car in high school and like smashed it and I'm angry at him. Like, and then we work it out. It's not that kind of forgiveness, right? Or like my, boyfriend cheats on me and then I forgive him and like maybe we're friends, maybe I can't move on. Like, it's not that kind of thing. Like, this is not, it's so much deeper than that. You've taken someone's
Yeah, yeah.
life. You've taken someone's life. And so for me, just in my experience, I was, yes, like you said, I was Maya before my brother was killed. And then, then I went into like a shock. And then I was kind of like this shell of a person to kind of lead up to how I got to this place of forgiveness. And then I got really angry. I got really angry. I was a very angry person. Everything that, because that's kind of my go-to emotion when things happen. And now I like cope with anger in a totally different way. And I have these tools, which I like to think is kind of one of the silver linings. You don't have to find a silver lining in loss. You don't have to. It's, a lot of people are like, I can't do it. That's just not for me. And that's okay. But for me, I do believe that we do have gifts in pain. And that was a gift for me, was learning that. And so, but I was very angry for years. I got stuck in that probably somewhere around year 2, all the way up to probably 4 or 5. And then 5, I got a lot of the answers that I needed. But for year 5, I started to release a lot of that. And that's why I was able to launch the show and tell my story, even though it was quite difficult. But
Mhm.
to answer your question about the forgiveness part, it's confusing for people because they're like, I will never forgive. I will never. And I'm not telling you like you have to be a religious person or you have to like go to God for it. I mean, if that's your journey, that's cool. My relationship with God definitely got better after this, which again, people are like, that's crazy. But I was very angry in the beginning, very angry. I'm like, there's no way there's God. How could you do this? All these different things, right? So I think you also go on a spiritual journey. And when you're coming through it, whether it's like me, it's at your 5-year mark. 5 years was just poignant for me. It was a moment in time for me. Some people it takes 2 years, some people it takes 10 years, some people it takes decades. You can't really put a timeline on it. But this forgiveness, and I think this is what's so important about homicide, is you're not forgiving for them. You're not, because they're going to live with this for the rest of their life. They know exactly what they did, whether they're deemed not mentally fit or not. They know what they did. They know what they did. And whether they get the sentence that you want them to get or you feel that they deserve, I mean, it starts to not matter. And I know that sounds very weird for a lot of people, but it doesn't matter anymore because there is no such thing as justice. Like I got really hung up on that too. I was like, I need justice for my brother. There is no such thing as justice because it doesn't matter if the person that took your sibling or loved one's life goes to jail forever or whatever the extreme, or like a month, a year, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Your sibling's not coming back or your loved one is not coming back, right? So that was a moment for me. That was a big moment for me when I was like, oh, this is not going to bring them back. And like people can tell you that all the time. They can say it won't bring them back, it won't bring them back. And I'm not saying don't fight for their justice because of that, because that's not right either. I definitely think you should. And it's a big part of my story. But that is a part of the forgiveness part of the journey, is like, okay, they're not going to come back. This person's going to live with that every single day. So it doesn't mean that if I were to sit down right now with the guy that did this to my brother, like, would I have love for him or would I be kind to him or would I be nice to him? No, I'm sorry, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. But at the same point, I can't walk around every day feeling so angry and wanting this revenge and wanting all of these feelings because I processed a lot of these emotions and feelings. So that's my definition of forgiveness, is not saying that it's okay, not saying it's okay what he did, not giving him the permission to, walk away with life and be like, oh, great, she forgives me. That's not what I mean by forgiveness. And I think it's important that we understand that you can hold more than one emotion at a time. You can feel like you can in your heart be like, you know what, I have to forgive and release this, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to necessarily forget that this person did this or deem them an okay person or a good person. And that's a
Right.
very complicated process to go through. And that's why I get like weird looks sometimes when people have just started to go through their journey or maybe are at a different point in their journey and they're like, what do you mean you forgive them? I'm not saying it's okay what they did. I'm forgiving for my heart, for myself.
Right. No, and I love that you said that because like I talk to a lot of people, right?
I know
And,
you
and
do.
I'm always learning. I'm always learning things, right?
Mhm.
And so I can relate to what you just said right there in such an intimate way, um, that it just blows my mind that someone else actually feels the same way, right?
Yeah.
Now, for those who are experiencing it, and in the beginning stages, like I do, they're going to process. They have to go through a whole change,
Hmm.
and some of them are going to get stuck.
Hmm.
And I used to watch individuals that have experienced similar things, and I watched what they did, and and I watched the anger. See, I can relate to the anger part, right? You know what I'm saying? Because I used to be an angry dude, man. Hey, what? I'm about
Mhm.
to go turn this place down. You have
Oh,
no
yeah.
idea what's about to happen, right?
Yeah.
And over a period of time, Tony had to learn how to check myself, right? And you know what I'm saying? I did. Because I was like, I can't go through life like this, right? I better check myself.
Right.
Because if not, I'm going to hurt a lot of people.
Mhm.
Then it dawned on me, that's not right.
Mhm.
They had nothing to do with this, right? When I lost friends through gang violence, police brutality, just stupid stuff. I was that guy,
Mhm.
you know. I resorted to the anger. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get my gun.
Mhm.
Somebody else got to feel my pain too, right? You know,
Mhm.
and I was like that with, I was like many other young men, like myself, in the gangs and things like that, not thinking about the consequences of what was going on and the people that we left, left to pick up the pieces like yourself, Mike.
Mhm.
You know, and so now I appreciate the work that you do because, like you said, when you're in the moment, right? We always feel as if we're going through this by ourselves, and now you see the other side, and you connected with all kinds of people, all
Mhm.
kinds of people who've gone through the same similar thing, and they all have the same question. And I love your answer. Hey, however you process it is the way that you're going to process it. You
Yeah.
don't have to necessarily do what I do, but the forgiveness is more for me and not for them.
Mhm. Yeah.
That right there is such a strong, deep statement.
Yeah. I think it's important. Thanks for saying that, but I do think it's important because I'm over 7 years into this journey myself, which
Mhm.
feels like a long time some days, and sometimes it feels like yesterday, as we all know too. Who's grieving or lost someone, we know that. But for me, I understand anger very deeply, and I'm actually I'm doing a talk at my summit in April about releasing grief anger because it's so tough, and I hear it in a lot of people's voices when they're either in, my Facebook group or in my private support groups or, just depends, or TikTok or wherever, right? Like I can hear it, whether it's in
Mhm.
their voice or in their chat, or I can hear it and I'm like, that was me. Like that was me. And it's interesting because, I think that we still will feel it. And I think that's what can scare people sometimes too. Like if somebody had told me that, I'd be like, oh my God, what? And what that means is that you're still going to feel those emotions from time to time because there's this whole idea in grief that like there's 5 stages or 7 stages, whichever one you subscribe to, right, of grief. And while I do think all of those are very valid, I think there's some like addendums that we need to look at with that. One, you're not going to experience it in a linear way. Like for me, us talking about anger here, I went into like complete shock. I was just like, and just went to anger, like, and got really stuck in anger. It doesn't mean that I didn't, experience some depression or, some of the other emotions that might come along with it, but like anger was my go-to. That was like my grief drug of choice, right? And so
Yes,
that was
yes.
it, right? But like some people will talk to me about like bargaining, like saying like if it only it had been me, why did it have to be him? Like I didn't experience those emotions. And I think it's really important because people that we talk about this because people will come to me, and I'm sure you've heard this a lot too, Tony. People will be like, well, I was in shock and I was in denial. And I just like got really depressed. And then like I got stuck there, right? Speaking about being stuck. And they're like, but I didn't get angry or I didn't get so like there's all this pressure to like experience the 5 stages of grief or to pass
Right, right.
in a linear way through it, right? And that's just so false. Like it's so false. And it's something that I really try to normalize too in a lot of my talks because while it has a lot of validity, it's a tool to help you understand what you're experiencing in your grief journey. It's not really meant to be like, okay, week 1, you're going to be in shock.
Yeah,
Week
yeah,
2, you're going to
yeah.
be in denial. Week 3, like that's not how it works. I mean, there's still times when I wake up 7 years into this and I'm like, oh, okay, my brother was killed. Like, oh, okay. And that's kind of like
Mhm.
reliving it. It's not as bad as it was 7 years ago. It's not as bad as it was 5 years ago. It's not as bad as it was 3 years ago, right? But it still happens. Do I still get angry sometimes thinking about what happened? Yes,
Mhm.
but it doesn't consume me every day, which is a part of that releasing, letting go, that part of it. But there's also this pressure, I think, with the 5 stages of grief at the end is acceptance. And that's one I just don't agree with, because we have to reframe that, because people are like, well, at acceptance, you move on. You don't move on. Tony, you
No.
and I are sitting here talking about this how many years later, after how many losses you've been through. I've been through this significant loss 7 years ago. You don't move on. And that can freak people out sometimes too. They're like, what do you mean? I'm going to feel like this forever? No, you're not going to feel like this forever. But you are going to carry this with you. Like you said earlier, there's a you before the loss, there's a you during the processing, and then there's someone that comes out on the other side. And I still think I'm evolving to that person on the other
Mhm.
side. And I think I will continue to do so, just because of the work that I'm doing, and I'm around all of these amazing siblings that have lost a sibling and want to share and want
Mhm.
to talk and want to connect in their own ways. And so I don't believe in acceptance. I believe in accepting that it happened and acknowledging that it happened. But I think acceptance forces people to move on, and we don't. And so when you get to the place of acknowledgement or acceptance, it's framing it in a different way to say, like, okay, I am aware that this has happened and I
Mhm.
am processing my journey. That's what I'd love
Right.
for us to look at that step or part of the grief journey as instead.
Understood. You said something, and I want to touch on. I want to touch on both of them. Um, I want people to understand that the 5 stages of grief, right? You know what I'm saying? It's a great pillar, like you said, it's a great pillar. And I want to add to that. What people don't understand, because they get wrapped up into wanting to define
Hmm.
grief. The 5 stages of grief was written for terminal ill cancer patients,
Yes, by Dr.
not for
Kubler-Ross. Yes.
right, right,
Mhm,
exactly, right.
mhm.
So that's one thing I want people to understand. It wasn't for people who were grieving. Yes, they was grieving, but they were still alive. So they wasn't talking about the people that was experiencing that loss. They were talking about people who was experienced the loss through terminal illness.
Yeah, it was originally, you're absolutely right, Tony, thanks for bringing that up. It was originally brought up, or created, by Dr. Kubler-Ross, and then added on by
Mhm.
other people have added on to it, but
Right, right,
with the
right.
intention of anticipatory grief, which is why I do find that a lot of the siblings that I talk to who have had anticipatory grief, which, it's never the same until it actually happens, right? But like going
Right.
through cancer or, different terminal illnesses, to your point, they experience those a lot more, and there's a reason for that, so that's great that you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also that terminology, um, moving on, it makes it seem, it gives and forgive me for this, because I know the way that's going to sound, but in a lot of ways, it makes me feel as if it's giving false hope
Mhm.
that there's some sort of end to this,
No, I
right?
think that's really well said. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's like the chapter's gonna end, and it's not. It's a part of your story. It
Yeah, it's a
stays with
part of
you.
who you are now,
Mhm.
right? And so that's why I kind of, I switched it up, everybody's different about how you go through it, but I switched it up and I said, you know what, you're going to grow through what you're going through.
Mhm.
Meaning, you know what I'm saying, and we've touched on it. There's going to be versions of yourself that you're going to have to grow into in order to adapt to the reality that you're now living in, right? The world that you now are embarked into, unintentionally, right?
Mhm.
It's an adaptive survival mechanism to grow into the version of yourself that can survive, or the version of yourself that's going to live.
Mhm.
And there's a difference. Surviving, meaning that you've just become a version of yourself that you could tolerate life.
Yeah.
When you're growing into the person that's going to live, not only did you accept the part of the survival, but you turn it in a way to where you say, you're like yourself, like yourself, I'm going to change. I'm going to help someone else that's gone through this. And I'm going to have the best possible human experience that I possibly can, even though I carry this loss with me. Yes, I may have come to a place of understanding instead of acceptance, a place of understanding that no matter what I do, it's not going to change the past.
Yep.
But what I do now will help change someone else's life so they don't have to experience it the way that I did. So we turn it around for the good and the better, and the better is ourselves, because the stages now this is where it gets really, really fun for me. The stages of healing when you're going through that, right? Like I would have hated to have been in your path if you was angry. I'd have been like, no, no, no. I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna wait till you get. You need a punch bag. We're gonna want to go
Yeah.
to the gym. I
Mm-hmm.
don't see Robbie turn me up. No, let's go to the gym, man. Let's go to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Throw
Yeah.
the punch
Yeah.
bag and let you deal with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be the one warning people. You don't want to go over there. She's gonna get you.
Mm. I
Right?
really was that angry. Oh yeah, I really was that angry. And
Yeah.
I'm really honest and open about it. In the first season where I tell my story, I'm very open about it. I mean, to the point where I was very, very, just angry all the time. And like, I was not the most pleasant person to be around all the time. And it was quite exhausting, to your point of what you were talking about before, because I was surviving. And I really wasn't surviving, because I feel like when you're in survival mode, you're not always really surviving. You're just like doing the bare minimum. And, I
Mhm.
was drinking because like I didn't want to feel all the pain. I was, all over the place with my career, which I had never been that way in my life ever. And it was just like I felt like every day I was just barely making it to work, barely making it to, and it just felt like, and I got sick of it. I think that was a part of the process for me too. I got sick of feeling like I'm just making it. I'm just making it in every single way. And that's not a way to, you're not living, to your point, Tony. Like you're not living at all. You're just trying to make it, trying to make it. And so once you get to that point where you, like you said, you are at a point of understanding, you're at a point of this is what's going to happen. You start to take steps. Like for me, it was doing a podcast. For you, it's doing a podcast. For other people, I know people that have written books. I know people that run, their own support groups. I know people that walk in breast cancer walks. Like it doesn't have to be something, crazy huge, but like it's something that makes them feel connected to the person that they've lost, and to put whatever it is that they're feeling, whether it's the anger, the depression, sadness, whatever it is that you're feeling, it's putting that into a positive outlet. And it can be something very, very small, or it could be something that you want to create. I had no idea. I did not think this was going to be like a thing for me. I thought I was just going to tell my brother's story. And now I'm here almost 2 years later with, a community, talking to people like you, Tony, on podcasts. And I am really enjoying it. So I also just tell people, be really super open, because you don't know where your journey is going to take you when you start that living part again. I think
Yes.
that's the beautiful part of it.
I love that, and we got a comment in here, and we'll pop up here. But I want to say this: I totally agree with what you said right there, right? Because being open to where the journey is going to take you, I often tell people this: you once you, if it's part of your gift, allow your gift to manifest itself. See
Hmm.
where it takes you. Be willing to surrender everything that you think has made you comfortable
Yep.
and safe in this world, and relinquish it,
Hmm.
and then be open to what it's trying to give you, the education, the knowledge. Because I don't know, for me, like it was as if my brain was a computer, and all of a sudden all of this stuff downloaded on me, right? And I was like, oh, what is this, right? And it was like, oh, the hard drive is working.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, no, 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 we're not going to do that. But then something happened, and not everybody's going to do this or do what we do by doing podcasting. I mean, I started a nonprofit, I wrote a book, I've done a movie, I've done this pot, just all of these different things, conferences, etc., support groups, right?
Yep.
All of these different things. Not everybody's going to do that. Everybody's going to do grief their way.
And that's okay. And that's what I like.
Yes,
That's
yes.
I think both of us try to give that permission to people and like tell people, because sometimes and I'm sure this happens to you all the time too, Tony, but I have people write me, they're like, I wish I had done this podcast, or I wish I had done like something like a journal that I wrote or something like that. And I'm like, but if you like, what do you want though? Like, what is your journey? What do you feel called to? And it's interesting because 99% of the time they're like, well, I'm actually thinking about doing this or like this. And like, what do you think? And I'm like, if that's what you feel, and this can be a spiritual thing, or just, you don't have to be a spiritual person or a godly person to feel this way. It's just you as a human. If you feel called to do something, you're probably meant to do it. Like, that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned through such significant trauma and loss. And I think
Yeah.
that's not just through loss, it's just trauma in general. If you feel called to do something, or however you want to express your grief or your loss or your trauma, like, do it, because it's probably the right path. And it's kind of a part of that journey where you start the part of living again, but it looks different. And then, like you said, there's the steps of healing. And that's, I feel like that starts when you start to be like, okay, I want to live again. I don't want to just make it, I want to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the part about healing is that people don't understand. I think this, and let me know what you think about this. Healing hurts.
Mhm.
Healing is revealing, because it opens us up to a point to where you have nothing else to hide, right? And it can take you on a journey in life, because then we find that there's a lot more to us that has been unhealed, that we now have to address to become the best version of ourselves as we begin to grow through this process.
Yeah.
And I found that, because that's where I got stuck at, but it was something about it, like, and everybody's different. It was something about the process of healing that I knew in my heart that I had to go through, because I knew that the angry Tony, the world wasn't ready for it. It wasn't ready for it when I became that angry Tony, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
the version of me now, the bigger adult version, I'm a little bit more strategic, what I'm saying? I have a little bit more experience now. And I may be a little rusty, but I'm pretty sure it'd be like jumping on a horse, right? You know what I'm saying? Once you do it,
Yeah.
you never forget how to do it, right?
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? It comes back. But the problem was, I was afraid of what I was going to do.
That's powerful stuff, Tony. Yeah.
Yeah, I was afraid. I'm not afraid to admit that, right? You know what I'm saying? I was afraid of the damage that I was going to do to other individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I thought about my younger sister, I said, you know what? If I become this version, she'll never forgive me. Although there's people that said, oh, I would understand. I think you would.
Yep.
I don't think you would, right? And so I had to make a decision. I said, do I want to leave a bunch of broken bodies along my path? Or do I want to leave something behind that my family can be proud of?
Mm-hmm. And you can be proud of.
Yeah, well, I'm always
But you're not really at that point though. That was me. Like, I feel like when you're having that awakening, like you're describing, Tony, like, I don't know that we care about ourselves enough at that point to be like, oh, well, I want to be proud of myself again. That for me had to come with even more time. I was like you, Tony, like, I was like, okay, I'm like, is my sister going to be proud of me? Are my loved ones going to be proud of me? Like, am I actually, like, what am I doing here? Right? Like, what is the legacy? And and then I realized the most important person is myself, right? And that was a part of the journey too. But I feel like you really lose that in the grief process. Sometimes you lose yourself, and that's okay. Like, I like to tell people all the time, it's okay to feel lost, and it's okay to not know, your next turn or what you need to do. But I wanted to comment about the healing aspect that you said. Like, it's scary because healing is not like, it sounds really great. Like self-help books make it sound really amazing.
Right?
This beautiful journey. Like we're gonna go, eat, pray, love, which great movie, great book. But like it's what we don't always talk about is the fact like why do people stay stuck? Why do people stay stuck in depression or anger? Or well, there's lots of reasons why, but also the process of healing. Like, and I'm not saying, it's not hard. It is. It was hard for me. It's hard for you. It's hard, but it's about
Mhm.
what's on the other side. Like I feel like we glamorize a little too much, like getting to the living part or getting through the steps of healing, and we glamorize that part. And so when people start to go through the healing process and say, I don't want to just survive, like I want to, it's corny, right? But thrive, but it really live. I like us saying live better because like,
Right.
living every day can't be we're on a beach in paradise and that's just how it is. It's not life, it's not reality. But living, you can be fulfilled every day. You can be happy every day. You will have hard days, you will have, good days, but like you can feel good about yourself every day, which was shocking for me coming out of this. And like I still have hard days though, and I still look for tools, but I think it's intimidating though when you start to do the healing. It can be very intimidating, and I know for me it felt like an insurmountable goal. And for me, it felt like climbing Mount Everest, which is not something I ever care to do. But it felt like
You
that for
never
me.
know.
Yeah,
You
no, I
never
don't know
know.
about
I may
that.
be like, Maya, we're going to Mount Everest. Would you like to come? And you might be like, Tony, I am not going to come. No, come on, come on. Because I'm
Oh my
really good at
gosh.
talking
You
people
know
to
what?
do and stuff like that.
I do say never these days, so I shouldn't say
Yeah,
that. You're right.
I'm
You
good at
never
talking
say
to people and
never.
doing stuff like that now. So just be careful. Don't
Yeah.
don't don't say that.
Yeah, I know. Now I'm friends with you, Tony. It's like, oh my gosh. But I do feel like that's a really bring like a good point that you brought up and a really big point because, it sounds really great to heal, but it's not going to a spa and putting cucumbers on your eyes and like
Yeah.
it's not. It's a journey. And I love what you said too, because this happened to me as well, is when you start to heal from one aspect of your life, which could be this, loss that you've gone through, if it's a sibling like me, or multiple losses or whatever you've been through, it will start to uncover other aspects of your life because you're not just healing from that one particular situation, even though it might be the most magnanimous or, difficult situation you've been through in your life. You will start to uncover all these other things, which is what happened for me too. And it changed and it continued to change my life. And you'll notice relationships in your life change, whether it
Mhm.
be your significant other, and it can be for the good. I mean, it's all going to be for the good, but it can be
Yes.
surprising because it might not look the same. It can be with your immediate family, it can be with your friends. I mean, for me, it's like all of the above. It changed
Yeah, yeah,
everything for me.
yeah.
My life looks
No.
totally different, 7 years into this than it did, 7 years ago. I don't have the same people in my life. A few, and I call those people my gems. But like I'd say, when I was getting to year 5 of my journey, like that was kind of my awakening. And when I was like, well, I'm going to start living, and like some of the people that I thought were really positive in my life, even then, were probably not supposed to be in my life
Right.
anymore, right? Or in the same capacity. So it's that can be
Yeah.
another aspect of the healing journey that is difficult. You start to uncover relationships that might not be so healthy or just may have been there for a reason or a season. They're not your lifetime because it was someone that was supposed to help you get through that time, or maybe was really you thought was serving you prior to the loss of your loved one or whatever traumatic event you've been through. So these are deep things and these are hard things because it can feel
Yeah.
very
Oh,
freaking
look.
lonely. That's the part of it. It starts to get lonely. And we
Yeah.
don't like to feel lonely as humans, right? So that's another aspect to it.
That's very, very true. I'm gonna pop this comment up here,
Sure.
and let's talk about that, and then we're going to dive a little bit into the secondary losses before we wrap this thing up.
Yeah,
So Lakaya had put a comment. Okay, there it is. Lakaya put a comment up here. Tell me what you think about this.
sure.
She posted, I learned that accepting that I've had loss has allowed me to become who I am. I'm able to remember them as they were when they were alive.
That's beautiful.
Hmm.
I like your name, Lakaya. That's a pretty name too. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I learned that accepting that I've had loss has allowed me to become who I am. Yeah, I think that's a great. I think what you've done, Lakaya, just in my opinion, you've learned how to interpret acceptance in your own way, and that was really our point. I think, Tony, right, is that acceptance shouldn't be this whole thing where it's like, great, done, final. you move on. Like, that's not how it works. And so I think what she's done and expressed, thanks for sharing that, is really beautiful, because it's saying that her way of accepting is saying, yes, this loss has happened, but now because I've accepted that the loss has happened, I'm able to reflect back and really remember who my loved one or loved ones, were while they were alive, and keep that memory. And I actually connect a lot with that statement, because I do feel like once I got to that year 4 and 5, when I was in what I would call the more of like understanding acknowledgement versus acceptance, because that can be a tricky word, but
Mhm.
that's when I started to,
I love that.
my brother, yeah, right. My brother started to visit me more in dreams. He started to bring me messages. It was very interesting, because I felt more connected to him
Right.
versus in my like deep anger and grief fog that I was in. So it was an interesting part of the journey. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. That was well said.
Yeah, I'm loving the comments. So we got a few people that are tuning in on both on all the different platforms. So I wanted to say thank you guys for tuning in and everything else.
Yeah.
And but I want to backtrack a little bit, because you did mention something. Then I think it's important, the secondary losses, right? How people experience those things, and because I think a lot of times we think about the sudden loss, the anticipatory grief, sometimes the displaced and complicated grief, right? And they all are associated with the loss in some sort of way. Do we ever think about the people, um, the friends of the family, the friends of of our siblings, or the friends of our sons and things like that? They experience that loss. And those are can be considered secondary losses.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'll get your opinion on that.
Yeah, great question, Tony. So I've heard people refer to secondary losses in two different ways. So in the way that you're referring to it, it's like not immediate family, right? It's people that were, to your point, like friends, or maybe the spouses of the family, right? That were, knew this person, but not for their whole life. Like, and this is
Mhm.
again being a little more sibling centric, but this applies really to if you lose your mom, your dad, your child, like any immediate family. It kind of is applicable to this same conversation, in my opinion. But um those secondary losses, so there's two different types, I think, of describing secondary loss. So those are secondary losses because that person maybe wasn't in their life as long, or had more of a secondary role. That's why we call it that way, right? And so what is difficult in that type of terminology, from my experience, and those particular people, is that they will often not understand. So they don't understand what the primary grievers are going
Right, right.
through, right? So they won't understand. This is something that I went through deeply, with a lot of my friends. They didn't get it. They didn't understand it.
Mhm.
I call a few that came through the process with me, like they're my gems, because they would sometimes tell me. They would say, the ones that didn't get it but like got it, they would say, you know what, I don't get it. I never lost my brother to a homicide. I have no idea what you're going through. I'll just come sit
Mhm.
with you. I'll just come be with you. But then there's a lot of the secondary people that will say really, really cruel things. And this is the difficult part of it. They'll say, you know, well, at least you had him for 27 years, or at least like, don't ever say that. Don't ever say that. And like, but these people, I have a different perspective 7 years later, though. And it doesn't mean that I think those people should be back in my life. I have empathy for some of the statements that they did. I never cut them out because they said something like that. I
Mhm.
cut them out of my life just because they lacked empathy. And I don't want anybody in my life that lacks empathy. That is a huge part of my healing process and my living side now. I don't want
Right.
anybody in my life that lacks empathy, because if you lack empathy for something that big and magnanimous and huge that's happened in my life, why the heck would I want you around in other aspects of my life? So I think, and people sometimes think, oh, because I didn't show you enough sympathy, or I wasn't sorry for you. And I'm like, no, we don't want that either. We don't want that at all. It's about the empathy, and if you don't know what to say, don't say it. But I find that like the people that are going through the secondary losses sometimes are wildly inappropriate too. It can be like, I still get messages to this day from people that interacted with, I wouldn't even call them secondary. I'd call them like tertiary or beyond losses, where they
Yes.
like recorded videos with my brother, or they did they knew him for this very short period of time, and they come to me trying to get me to like connect with them or feel bad for their loss. And like, while their loss is very valid and they lost a friend that they knew for a month, a year, however long they knew him,
Mhm.
it's not as, I'm sorry, this is where I put the my foot down on this type of stuff. I'm sorry, it's not as significant as me losing my brother. I've known him since the day he was born, prior to that in my mother's stomach, right? That is
Right,
a
right.
different loss. So you don't get to do that. And so it's that I get a little riled up about that one still because it's wildly inappropriate. So I feel like the way that you can move through with people who are going through the secondary losses is they've got to have a lot of empathy for the people who are kind of the primary group that has lost. And I
Right.
think I get asked that question a lot. It's actually really cool. Some of the people that come on my lives or, different things that I do, just like you do, Tony, and they'll say, "Hey, my best friend lost their sister or lost their brother. Like, how do I support them?" That's a freaking amazing secondary loss person because you're coming
Yes.
from a place of wanting to just be there. Like, I am so blown away by that. And even the parents, like they're going through a primary loss, as I call it. I don't know, I just come up with these terms, but they'll come on my live sometimes and say, "How can I support my daughter? How can I support my son?" And I'm blown away by that. So, and that's also done something to my mind, like you talked about downloading. I do some some serious downloads with this stuff too.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm like, if a mother who has just lost her child can have empathy and really care about her daughter that's struggling with this loss too, someone who is considered a secondary loss or tertiary or beyond, come on, like, come on. You know what I'm saying? That person is in so much
yeah,
pain and they're still able to have empathy. But I think secondary losses can also mean another thing too, Tony. I think it can also mean that it's all the things that we anticipated to do with this person or anticipated to watch this person do in their life, and we'll never see them do it. And so what I mean by that is, like, my brother was killed when he was 27. So he never got married. He had a very serious girlfriend. They probably would have gotten married, but you can say could have, would have, should have. They never got to do that, right? They never
mhm,
had kids. He never, I mean, he was in his career, but he had a long way to go, right? He was 27. That's so young, And there's all these things, like he never got to see me get married. He's never gonna meet his two nephews, like he's like all of those things. You get really caught up in those. Those are also secondary loss. So there's kind of two sides of
yes,
secondary
yes,
loss. So those are all these other losses that you continue to feel. And that's why when people are like, you can move on, like, no, because you're going to remember at these milestones, like, oh, like my brother isn't here, or my fill in the blank, my loved one isn't here, and you thought that they would have been. And
yeah,
so those are very real things. And I always want to encourage people to allow yourself to feel that, like, it's okay on your wedding day to miss your sibling or loved one, whoever it is that you've lost. I know this is a grief podcast, so we talk about a lot of different people that we've lost, but it's okay to feel that. And a lot of people ask, like, how do we incorporate them? And I think that's a beautiful idea. Like, you need to do whatever feels right for you because you will feel those losses. And I think that's something that's not talked about enough. And
yeah.
that's when it creeps back up on you a little bit, those milestone things that go on in your life. So that's my interpretation of secondary losses. There's kind of two different interpretations.
Yeah, very well said. Very, very well said. I don't think I could have put it any better because it was like you read my mind and put it out there. I was like, all right, I got you. I see. I'm like, go ahead, do your thing.
Yeah,
Go ahead, do your thing. Um, Maya, I want to say thank you for being on the show today. We definitely got to have many more. Now that I know that you're on TikTok, I'm going to find you and maybe we can do some lives over there,
I
right?
would love for you to come live on my TikTok. My TikTokers would
Yeah,
love that.
I would
Yes.
think that would be a lot of fun. So, I got your TikTok handle. I'm going to send you a friend request. So, so we can do some lives. I've been wanting to do some lives on TikTok for quite some time.
Come on over.
Um,
We'll have a blast. We have amazing, amazing people on there. So yeah, definitely come on over. It's
let's
my
do it,
favorite
lady.
place to
Let's
go
make it
live.
happen.
Yeah.
You probably get one from me today. I'm like, I got you. I got you. Right. And I think that we have an amazing time because I really
Totally.
did enjoy this really deep conversation about this, right? You brought that story, you brought that different side of it where a lot of people don't really think about it, and such an amazing person. Thank you for
Thank you,
being on.
Tony.
The way that you articulate things, that people can grasp and take those things away from them, and hopefully they got their notepad out and said, "Oh, well, this is what we talked about, right?" Because you dropped some gems over there, man. So amazing, so intelligent. So yeah, I can't wait to do more with you. And so I like to end it off like this. Okay, people find you.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
then secondly, if you could leave the audience with something today, what would you leave them with?
Yeah, great question. I love that. We're so alike, Tony. This is fun. We definitely need to do this again. But yeah, so you guys can find me. So the main website is thesurvivingsiblings.com. Super easy. It's got everything on there, but we are on TikTok at Surviving Siblings Podcast. I spend a lot of my time on TikTok. I'm there Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I usually stay on for 2 to 3 hours. So if you want a specific time to join me then. You can also find me. I have a private Facebook group, the Surviving Siblings Podcast. Everything's the same. So same for Facebook, Surviving Siblings Podcast. And then same for Instagram, and then YouTube as well. So please follow us on all those channels. We would love that. Our new season will be out March 13th, the 5th season, which is totally crazy. And we have our first ever summit that you can find more information about as well. It's all over the place, but that'll be April 20th, and it's virtual, and it's for surviving siblings or anyone who wants to support a surviving sibling. Come find out about it. It's a day-long adventure. I'm an event planner full-time, so I'm really excited to bring this event full circle. And thanks for letting me share, Tony. And if I had to leave something with you guys today, I think maybe a twofold thing. Something that helps a lot of people is when I describe grief as a snowflake. So there are no two snowflakes that are like. Same with people, but same with grief. So just remember that, because Tony's had his journey in grief and I've had my journey in grief, you'll connect with a lot of aspects of both of our stories, but your journey is your own. So, if you feel like you're at a certain place a year into it, feel it, make sure, just go through it. It's like approaching a storm and you're on the ocean, right? You can try to go around it, but it's going to catch you at some point. You got to go through it. So just go through that storm and know that your journey is unique, just like a snowflake. I say that all the time. And it's okay that it looks different than my journey, than your journey, Tony. It's yours, it's your own, and it's important to connect with other people. So that would be probably my closing statement for today.
I love that. I love that. And again, thank you for joining me. We've got a lot of people on the different platforms and watching. Thank you guys for tuning in and enjoying this conversation that we have. And as always, I am Tony Lynch. I am the host of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And this is going to conclude another episode. Now, before I get off, if you made it all the way to the end and you have not already, do me two favors. One, go over to Surviving Siblings podcast, subscribe to the channel, and go check out the amazing episodes. I have subscribed and I have been checking out the episodes. Wonderful job. And if you enjoy these conversations, do me a favor, and if you haven't already, head over to my YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. We're switching things up a little bit, doing lives on all these different platforms as well. Got some more amazing people coming your way. So don't miss out. But most importantly, if you guys are struggling right now, we do have resources. Please reach out, take advantage of the resources. Don't try to do this alone. And just remember, you are loved, and this world is a better place with you in it. Maya, again, thank you for blessing me with your journey and your story. And for everyone else, this is going to conclude this episode. Until next time, you guys keep your head up. Peace.